Hey guys, what's up? It's Heather. I'm in the youth room. Super Bear. Ugh. Who left that couch looking like that? Anyways, I miss you guys. Sorry about last week. I don't know what happened with the video. I could not get it to upload. It took about 20 minutes to get to 2%. And so I gave up on it, and the next day I tried and it wasn't working. So maybe this week it'll be better, I hope. So it's Wednesday, so if this is up on Wednesday, it worked. If not, then bad problems. Anyways, let's get into the lesson. The scripture that we're going to go over today is in the book of James, chapter 1, and we're going to start in we're just going to go back to verse 12 and read all the way through verse 18, okay? I'm going to read all that scripture out of the NLT, and then I'm going to do a loose translation out of the King James or the New King James. Probably like a mixture of both. Because I don't have that Bible with me and it's on my phone and I'm recording. So I have a loose translation written on paper. Anyway, so chapter 1 of James, verse 12. It reads, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So do not be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Whatever is good and perfect comes down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. He chose to give birth to us by giving us his true word, and we, out of all creation, became his prized possession. And I really want to focus on verse 17, and I encourage you guys to go look this up. If you don't have the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app, probably go get it, and you can read it in every single version that ever existed. I think you can read it in other languages. Not that I think any of you can read a different language, but if you wanted to try, there's a Bible app, and you can read that for free if you want to learn a new one. So anyways, I'm going to do a loose translation of verse 17. It says, every good and perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, in whom is no change or shadow of turning. And so the scripture, I've always found that verse very encouraging, especially out of the New King James Version, just because I like how it puts God the Father of lights. And oftentimes when we think of God, we think of his purity and the whiteness and the light that surrounds him. You know, when you see holy people in movies, they have like this white glow about them. And so we think of that when we think of God oftentimes, that he's going to be glowing and white. And so I like that depiction that it gives in this verse, but I also like that there's so many metaphors with that. And that he is the God of lights. He created all of earth, the heaven and the lights and everything. And with him there is no shadow of turning. He does not change. He is the same God today, yesterday, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 200 years ago. He's the same God. And I think it's important for us to remember that, especially in a time like now, where things aren't really normal and kind of scary, because we don't really know how to handle the situation or how to go about everything, or can we go to the store, can we not go to the store. And so it's important to remember that even though everything around us seems to be different, God is still the same. So I think I've said this before, that, you know, God's the same like in the baptism as he is in the wilderness. So when we think of Jesus in his life, in one of the gospel books, I'm not for sure which one at the moment, I don't remember, but you see Jesus' baptism and Jesus in the wilderness right next to each other in scripture. And what a harsh change in atmosphere, because, you know, at the baptism you see Jesus baptized, and then, you know, the sky parts and a dove comes down, and God's voice says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." And then in the temptation you see Jesus wrestling with the temptations of Satan and becoming the king of all, and, you know, doing miracles and trying to tempt God in his holiness. And so what a stark reality. We have this booming voice of God, and then we have the silence of the wilderness. And despite the fact that everything seems different in those circumstances, God is still the same through those. And we see that in Scripture. And we see that in Jesus and his faithfulness to God. And so I want you guys to think of that. So, you know, think of, you know, how everything was going great, and then all of a sudden the tides have changed. How have you seen God be faithful through this time? Have you thought of things differently? Have you thought God's maybe different during this time? How so, or how not so? How has God spoken to you differently? Do you think that the silence has helped? You know, kind of think about those things. Ask yourself those questions. I know that, you know, we have a God box here, so I could ask you the questions and you could throw it in there. We don't have that, so if you want to make your own God box, you can make your own God box, and then we'll throw it in our pile and burn them eventually. That's something fun if you want to do that. But really think about it. Think about God and how he is faithful and true, and the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and how that affects you and how that affects your life right now. And does it change your attitude about things if you have a bad attitude? And maybe you guys don't. Maybe you're enjoying no school. But if you're bored and you think that it's really not fun at the moment, maybe just ask yourself, you know, maybe I'm missing on something. God's still the same. Where am I missing the mark on this? Anyways, that's all I got today. Hopefully this video uploads. If it uploads, then it did. My prayers came true. I do miss you guys though. It's kind of creepy being up here by myself, and I miss y'all. It's barren here. One day we'll be reunited and I'll get to hang out and we'll do some fun stuff. Until then, we'll see you next week.